Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started today. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending our CentOS RHEL webinar, which is specifically hosted for our public sector customers. Before we begin, I want to take a few minutes just to give a brief overview of who Fierce is and what to expect to learn at the webinar today, an introduction to our speaker and how you can best access additional training and get additional questions answered after the webinar. So Fierce is a small woman-owned business specializing in reselling enterprise open source for our public sector customers. Special value-add elements that we bring are innovation brokering, license management, professional services, formal trainings, and custom technology enablement workshops. Our perspective as a reseller means that we are here to hear your goals and your technology challenges, and we respond from the perspective of our portfolio, not as a single vendor solution. We love to be an innovation broker, getting our customers access to the smartest people and the best technology we can find. We like to hear the entire challenge and then take ownership of finding our customers a complete solution. In addition to being an innovation broker, we offer several other value adds. If you need professional services as a part of an install for ongoing access to professional enterprise, we work with vendor professional service teams and can bundle those for you. This is both uncleared resources as well as cleared resources. We can also provide formal training. Today we're going to be talking about CentOS RHEL, which kind of falls into our Red Hat training era. Red Hat training is something that we provide for some time now. Today's webinar is an example of our technology enablement webinars. We design these as free sessions to share the best practices for implementation to your team. If you see anything that fits, we'd love to follow up with you. If this wasn't a fit, we'd like to know what we can still fill the gaps for your specific needs. As we said, we'd love to help. Speaking of our enterprise open source vendors, Fierce Software represents, I'd like to have a little humble brag here to showcase some of the awards that we have won over the years. We're proud for our work serving the public sector communities, which has resulted in a full trophy case in such a short time. And then finally, in this presentation, you will see how Red Hat supported tooling to provide a smooth in-place transition from CentOS Linux v7 to a fully supported installation of RHEL. The demonstration will show how simple it is to employ the convert to RHEL utility to migrate from CentOS to Red Hat Enterprise Linux in just a few minutes with only one reboot. Also, Russ, our speaker, will discuss how leveraging the power of Ansible Automation Platform can make it easy to back up, upgrade, migrate, and reboot from every CentOS system in your infrastructure with the least amount of time and effort and the greatest efficiency. Finally, here's a little bit contact information. If formal training is something that you and your team are looking to get your hands on, or you need further information or migration practices from CentOS to RHEL, please feel free to contact the Fierce personnel. You will be receiving an email from myself, which will just include a little bit rundown and questions from the webinar today, as well as a recorded copy of this webinar that you can share with your team members and anyone else who's interested and couldn't make it. Again, feel free to contact me for any of your training needs with your information on the screen. In addition to training, please give feedback of what you liked in the webinar, what you think we could improve it next time. Now I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we're going to get into why you came to the webinar, and I'm going to pass it over to Russ.
Over to Russ. I hope you can hear me. About to share the screen. I hope everyone's having a great day today, because you know, you might as well start well and finish well. For folks here on the East Coast, it's warm. For folks on the West Coast, I guess it's still morning, depending. And hopefully this is now in presentation mode. Can you verify that for me, please? I think
Looks
so.
great, Russ.
Okay, excellent, excellent. Thank you very much. So anyway, my name is Russ Pavlicek. I am a senior solutions architect with Red Hat, based loosely out of the Tysons Corner area. And we're going to talk about migrating from CentOS to Red Hat Enterprise Linux today. We'll talk a little bit about some of the other options out there, but also we're going to focus on why I think particularly moving to Red Hat Enterprise Linux makes the most sense if you are in this situation. So what we'll cover today here is just a real basic rundown. the impending end of life of CentOS, CentOS 7 in less than a year, and you can look at the rest of these things. Basically, we're just going to say, we're going to figure out why migration to RHEL would be good. What are the other possibilities? What are some of the things that you got to keep in mind if you're going to be doing that? We're going to have a we're actually going to have what I call an annotated demo and then a real demo. Why is that? Because the annotated demo will just talk through the steps that are going to go on, and then I'll show you the real demo. I'm one of those people that historically has issues with demoing software when people don't know what the software looks like, because frequently someone just stands there, they click a bunch of buttons, you see a bunch of things fly by on your screen, and they say, voila, we did it. And you're sitting there saying, well, I don't really know what I just saw, so I'm kind of taking your word for it. So we're hopefully going to give you a little bit more enlightenment than that as we go, and that's part of it. So why is this even a concern? By the way, just the way my geography on my laptop here is set up, I may not be able to see Q&A when you put it into the Q&A, but I will come back to it for sure by the time we are ready to wrap up. So please go ahead and put questions in the Q&A. There's two things. There's a chat, which is fine for just chatterboxing, but if you have a real question for me, put it inside the Q&A and we'll see what we can do with it before we are done. Anyway, so why is this even a concern? Well, I'm assuming that most of you all know that CentOS 7 has an end of life date of next June, so we're talking about less than a year away. It's been used widely as an almost RHEL type system for close to 2 decades now, from what I recall. I actually worked quite a bit with the CentOS team prior to them coming under the Red Hat umbrella several years ago. When we were doing some other things, I was with a different project at the time, but they were great people working there. But the bottom line is that when it hits that end of life, now obviously the software isn't going to roll over and die, but your risk begins to escalate because there's not going to be any more security patches, bug fixes. None of that is going to start rolling after that point. So it kind of makes sense to begin planning now, at least, for what you're going to do with those systems, because you don't want to involve a lot of risk, and particularly if you're working in a public cloud. I mean, that can be absolutely dangerous to be using an expired system like this. So the sort of the apparent question that some people ask is, why not just migrate to CentOS Stream? Now, for folks who may or may not be aware, CentOS Stream is the new direction of the whole CentOS project. Instead of being a downstream from RHEL, that is, instead of being essentially a re-implementation, almost a copy of RHEL, it sits on the upstream. That is, it's still in the development stream of RHEL. So it's actually closer to what RHEL will be than what RHEL is, if that makes any sense. By design, it's soup that isn't cooked yet. That's kind of the way that I look at it. It's a great platform if you are a software vendor and you want to make sure that your software will be working right in an upcoming release. CentOS Stream is terrific for that. However, if you're looking for stability, basically the things that the original CentOS project was known for, CentOS Stream simply isn't a good choice, and it simply isn't meant for production workloads at all, or anything close to a production workload. So let's first explore a few of the myths surrounding CentOS. Some people think that CentOS Linux is a commercial offering from Red Hat. That is incorrect. It's always been a community project. It's been a wonderful community project. Now, Red Hat has directly supported the project for several years now with staffing and resources and a number of other things, but it is not a commercial offering. It's never been a commercial offering. It is just a project. Now, some people think that it's a free version of RHEL. That is also incorrect. It's very similar to RHEL historically, CentOS Linux, but it had to be rebuilt, rebranded, recompiled, repackaged. So it is highly similar, is the way I would put it, to RHEL. And generally speaking, if you have a package that will run on RHEL, it would run on CentOS, because they are so very, very similar to one another. And then another issue that comes up when we start talking about this is, well, the other community Linux distributions bring that same value as RHEL does. That is also incorrect. We'll talk about this a little bit more in detail in the next couple of minutes. Community-driven distributions are great. Just for, I don't think I mentioned up front, but I've been working with open source for over 25 years. In fact, I have spent a large amount of time on the other side of the fence. In other words, in the project space, rather than where I am at the moment. But it's wonderful stuff. However, your agency or whatever it is, on putting it on a community-driven distribution, it doesn't have the support, doesn't necessarily have the stability and security, and these are things which RHEL brings to the table. And we'll also talk a little bit about services like Insights, which add a lot as well. So I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes talking about some of the possible choices for CentOS or RHEL, but there are other things that undoubtedly, if you're in this situation, you're considering right now. So I'm just going to touch on a few things, not going to go into great detail. So what are possible choices? Well, you've got RHEL-like community projects, like Rocky Linux, Alma Linux. They're out there. There are other community distributions, like Debian or Arch Linux. There are commercial distributions like SUSE Linux or Ubuntu Linux Pro, or you could migrate to RHEL. So let's just do a very quick sort of benefit risk list. And once again, this is high level, not complete by any means, just to kind of put it out on the table, because if you're trying to decide, you're going to have to look at all these things and more, honestly. So there are the RHEL-like community distributions, like we said, Rocky, Alma. I don't know if there are more out there these days. The one obvious benefit for most of them is cost of acquisition, $0. You download the bits, you get started. Now, there's an issue, and that has to do with the migration path. I'm not super up to date on everything. Last I knew, Rocky, I believe, had a script that you could run. Alma, last I saw, was still a bunch of kind of steps laid out in a manual. Don't shoot me if I'm wrong here. But, that is something that has to be considered, because it's one thing if you're talking about one CentOS box sitting in a lab somewhere. But more than likely, we find that there are lots of CentOS boxes out there. Some organizations may have dozens, others may have hundreds or even thousands of them. So the migration path really is an issue, simply for the amount of time, if nothing else, but also on the surety of it, because you want something that's going to go from A to B and work. Because if you're busy debugging dozens or hundreds of machines, you're going to be in for a lot of pain. So you don't want to get down that path. So that's something that has to be looked at. Now, what are the risks of these other downstream sort of distributions? One is that during the migration, you only have community support. Community support can be great, but once again, if you're doing lots of these things and things are getting a little hedgy, may not be a whole lot of fun. You, of course, after the migration, once again, community support only. So if you start hitting problems, they become your problems. And depending on your organization, that may be a risk that they don't want to take. But that's, for you and your organization to decide, obviously. The continuation of projects rely largely on the efforts of the community. So in other words, you've got these things like Rocky and Elma and so forth, and if they're going to be here in 2 years, it's because of community effort. It's not like they've got a sponsor in most cases, not at least a large sponsor. And places like this, all of these things, I would argue, are not. There's no real official support if you're doing production. And most of us, I think, are in situations where if you have a production workload, if you have something that is key to the organization that you're working with, you want to have someone to call. You want to have some way of saying, hey, something's going wrong here. Can you help me? And so that is, for me, one of the biggest downsides, I think, with using the downstream versions. Now, there are other community distributions out there that, like Debian GNU Linux, like Arch Linux, dozens more, literally. Once again, the benefits are obvious. Download and go. Some of the risks there, that first list of risks, same as we saw in the last one. But then you've got additional risks because these ones are not like RHEL. In a lot of cases, they're using a different package manager, which means that you have to rebuild these systems from scratch using a new recipe, as it were. Assuming that you have some way that you put together your standard system now, you're going to have to reinvent that because it's going to have entirely different packages, entirely different names. You have to reinstall, retest. If you have any add-on code, code that is being developed within your organization, or any third-party code that you got to make sure, first off, that you can get that third-party code in a way that can be easily installed. Because if it came in an RPM, it may have issues on Debian or something like this. So, I mean, you're going to have to work that out. Plus, and we'll talk about this a little bit more as we go too, retooling. This is one of the things that I've been acutely aware of over the years from my own background. Is like you change from one distribution type to another, and suddenly the tools change, the names of the packages change, everything changes, and you have to rework all the automations that may already exist within your organization to use the new tools, the new automation tools, but also the new tooling within the packages themselves. So, I mean, this is a heavy lift. It's something, if it's worth it to you, you might want to do, but it's a definite heavy lift. Now, there are other commercial Linux distributions out there, of course, like, SUSE SLES and Ubuntu Linux Pro, things like this. Once again, package managers are different, packages are different. So you're doing a reinstall, retest. Once again, the issues with your add-on applications, if either from in-house or third parties, you got to make sure you can get them in a way that is consumable. You got to make sure that they run the same, etc. And then you've got things like the re-education of staff to, once again, with the automations. So, I mean, it's a heavy lift. And so let's just spend the next few minutes, though, on why going to RHEL might be your best choice. First off, we have to start with the differentiator that CentOS isn't RHEL. I mean, it's very similar in a lot of ways, but it's missing a lot of the things that bring value in the RHEL space. And so these are things that will be added to you by making this trip. First off, Red Hat Insights. We'll talk about this a little bit more in a few minutes. This is a service-based offering that we offer that allows you to look into your environment and to basically avoid problems before they occur. Really, really powerful. Like I said, we'll talk a little bit about that. Things like being able to do an in-place upgrade, really important, because if you've ever had to try to do a rebuild, some of these other things that we've talked about, that takes a lot of time and can be very painful. The consistency of RHEL, we at Red Hat have been building RHEL for years, and the build environment that's used for it is exceptionally consistent. And we do a lot of testing, a tremendous amount of testing, which I don't think people are necessarily aware of. But to make sure that when it comes out of Red Hat, it has a certain consistency from release to release that you may not find in other places. One big area is the government security certifications. I understand that we probably have a number of government customers on right now. This is a big deal. If you're working in that space, it certainly is a big deal, and it's one of the things that's top of mind when you're talking about Red Hat, is trying to make sure that we are up on our certifications. Certification also having to do with hardware and software vendors. I've done this a lot in the last couple of years where we've been working with our partners. We want to make sure that the software that you might want to bring in-house is going to be working on Red Hat Enterprise Linux and working well. And we spend a large amount of time with that. So when certain applications, third-party applications, are announced, we've gone through the mill on it. Clouds, big thing with us is, of course, the hybrid cloud initiative. So we want to make sure that whether you're running your RHEL software on a virtual machine, on a physical machine, in a cloud, some public cloud somewhere, in a private cloud somewhere, that it is always a consistent and solid platform. That's very much top of mind for us. The automation and management tools, we heard a little bit about this in the intro, that one of the things that has been growing inside the RHEL world is the use of Ansible to add to the system management capabilities. Because there's a lot of things, of course, inside an operating system that can and should be automated. It saves a great deal of time, and by including playbooks, and a really tremendously growing number of playbooks that can be leveraged by system operations staff, we can reduce the time to get from A to B, to set up a system the way you want it, to make sure that security protocols are invoked and so forth. And so that's a big thing within the RHEL world. Live kernel patching is a thing with RHEL as well. So if you got those machines that have to stay up, but you need the security, this is a possibility. And then we've got our fixed lifecycle and extended lifecycle offering. So you want the security that your system is going to be supported for the short term or the long term. These are things that we bring to light. Now, when you're talking about Red Hat Enterprise Linux, one of the first things that generally comes up is support. And yes, we do have support for questions, bugs, looking for solutions. The big thing, I think for a lot of customers, is that when something is going amiss, it's not all on your shoulders. You have someone to call, someone to contact, saying, hey, we're seeing this. Have you seen this before? Is this an issue that you know about? And when push comes to shove, no one knows RHEL the way we know RHEL. We've got experienced people, we've got a knowledge base internally and all sorts of stuff, but we've got people that have worked on this for a very long time. So if you've got questions, if you've got issues, we are the people to go to, quite honestly. And in fact, just in general Linux knowledge, there are very few organizations that have the depth of just general Linux knowledge that you will find in Red Hat. It really is a strong suit for sure. One of the things that that people sort of don't think about, I think, is that when you go to support and you log an issue, you have maybe a bug that you have found. That just doesn't go into the support queue somewhere and get monitored. That can actually get sent into the engineering side of the house. The engineers are not only working on the response to it, but also making sure that future releases don't have that problem. And that's a big issue, quite honestly, because when you're doing a lot of things community based, it's, like I said, I really like a lot of the community offerings. But if you pick up a patch out of the community for some bug you found, that's great. But will the next release have that patch or something similar to it? That's a widely open question. With Red Hat, this becomes part of the things that we actually test for. And then on the other side of the coin from support is consulting. So if you're in that situation where you've got things and you're trying to get them together the way you want, we do have the Red Hat consulting arm. It is there. And with our partners at Fierce as well, there is a wealth of knowledge that is at your fingertips. So that once again, you're not going it alone. You've got a chance to bring things along in a way that that you can feel good about, because it actually works very well. Now, about stability and security, Red Hat Enterprise Linux is still the preeminent commercial Linux platform for production environments. There's a lot of other good offerings out there from different vendors, but there's a reason why so many RHEL-like systems exist in the first place. It's because we've kind of set the standard, and there are so many customers running RHEL for their key systems that it's for a reason, because we are in the business of giving you that stable and secure platform to work from. If you got that workload that has to be running, and that it's going to be running for years, RHEL is a great base to run it on, because it will run well. That's part of what we try to do. Now, security, the security side of it is another one. If you've ever worked with open source projects, frequently when the project is put out there, it's kind of got doors open. And that makes sense, because, how much security is this user going to need? Well, you're going to have to figure that out for yourself. You saw this a lot, particularly in some of the Kubernetes offerings. I think it's still true. If you download Kubernetes and just roll with it, it's like the doors are wide open. You compare that to something like OpenShift, which is our Kubernetes plus a whole lot more. We've already locked down a lot of those things. Why? Because you don't need to be finding that you missed a parameter somewhere. So we try to give you a starting point that is more secure by default, and then we try to document the things that may be of greatest interest for you in the security field. Engineering, once again, keeps track of what our customers need, and this is exceptionally important, because as bugs are found and whatnot, yes, everything that we do gets sent back into the open source projects, but sometimes we end up in a situation where we have customers that are facing issues, and perhaps the patch that was submitted wasn't accepted for the next release. So our engineers will actually make sure that before it goes out under RHEL, that it does have a patch which does work, so our customers are not affected until the patches submitted are finally rolled into the end project. We're taking those extra steps. Once again, too, if you're just sort of downloading patches from community sources, we don't know what ones you're using and what your need is. So by having engineering involved in the loop, if you're going through support, we'll know where the issues are, we'll know where the patches have to be, and And then just making sure everything plays well with each other. If you've ever worked with raw open source stuff, and I have, particularly in years past, they don't all play well together. You have to have certain things at certain levels and so forth. And that's part of the engineering excellence, honestly, that is coming here, is making sure that in a large, complex operating system, that all the pieces are working together. That is not a trivial task. Now let's talk a little bit about, some of the issues if you're still looking at a RHEL-like downstream distribution. Sure, when we find out about a bug, we publish it, we put them back upstream, submit them to the projects upstream, and we'll also issue individual patches if it's warranted for our current release. But if you're working on one of the downstreams, yeah, that may be available, but how long is it going to take before you see it? And what are you going to do in the meantime? I mean, if you've got an unpatched system, do you take it offline? Do you, downplay it? Do you run with the risk of it? These are all real questions. Whereas if you're actually working with RHEL, we're going to try to patch these things as quickly as possible, make the patches available as quickly as possible. And so you're not wondering, do I have the latest stuff? And how long until that problem that was perplexing me is actually fixed in the actual distribution itself. Another piece of this, of course, is roadmap. When you're working with Red Hat as a Red Hat customer, you can express your needs to us. And since we are involved not only with our own engineering, but also with the project engineering teams, and we are all over the map when it comes to having engineers out in the field, in the wild, as it were, the open source wild, submitting code to various projects. If there's a need, we can help influence where all these things are going, because we've got the feedback from our customers. And beyond that, in your own situation as a Fierce Software or Red Hat customer, these, our two organizations have a lot of knowledgeable technical people. So if you are trying to plot your own roadmap for your own organization, you're not doing it alone. You can come to Fierce. You can draw on the knowledge of Red Hat, and we can help you plot out a course that's going to make the most sense for you. It's going to be the safest for you, and the one that's going to yield the greatest technical returns. So you don't have to worry about rolling it all your own. You've got subject matter experts that you can draw on. I just want to spend just a minute on Red Hat Insights in particular. Insights, if you haven't touched it, it's a managed service. It continually analyzes the software, the platform, and it tries to anticipate problems before they happen, and then provides you with things like Ansible playbooks that you can then use to remediate. So it's incredibly powerful. So, if during the analysis it says, well, you could have a performance issue because of the way these things are configured, you have machines that are not patched, that are at risk. Like it says here, we've got the integration with both Ansible and Red Hat Satellite, so we can help automate the remediation, make it really, really simple. And this is included with the RHEL subscription. So this isn't something you have to buy or anything else. But if you're doing RHEL, you have access to Insights, which is, it's really, really powerful. So keep that in mind as well. Here's some numbers about improved efficiency, and unfortunately I don't know which study this one came from, but a 96% reduction in time to detect known risks to availability, performance, stability, and security. That's huge. 26% reduction in administrator steps to detect these known risks. So we're making the administrators more efficient. 88% less time to track patch status for all environments. Here, this particular instance, 1 minute and 24 seconds to discover vulnerabilities in a 100 VM environment versus over 15 minutes when performed manually. I think, 15 minutes to 1 minute, that's not a big deal, except if you've got a lot of these things and you're doing this reasonably often, that's a lot of time. And time is expensive. And frankly, I think most of us can find better uses of our time if we're not doing repetitive things. So this makes things streamlined, makes it a whole lot easier to deal with. 91% less task completion time to address a vulnerability. Once again, we have automations and things to make it really quick, and 69% reduction in time to detect policy violations. And that's a big one too, because it's not just about the bugs; it's about doing things in a uniform way. And if you're particularly if you're working inside the public sector field, you've got policies that have to be enforced, and you know it. And so if you can reduce the amount of time that you're checking for policy violations, that's superb. So let's go into what I'm calling this annotated demo. Now, as I said at the beginning, for folks who may not have been here quite at the beginning, we're going to see two versions of this. We're going to this is the steps of the demo taken step by step, or talk about each one, and then you'll actually see a real demo that's done on a VM, and the real demo sort of rolls past in about 2 minutes, but it's a little bit of an eye chart, and you might not get it. So that's why we're going to talk through this annotated demo first. By the way, there is a cheat sheet available on redhat.com. I think it's in the developers section, that calls out these steps as well. So this is not hidden knowledge. The first thing you're trying to do is, validate that you are in fact using CentOS, and these are commands that you can do for that. More than likely, you're already there, right? You already know what you got, but just in case. Then you want to update your system to the latest version. So you've got all the latest software. This is using the yum update. And the output will then go spilling around. Then you have to add a few packages here. First, you're going to grab the signing keys, and then you're going to actually add the SSL certificates that you're going to need. So this is just going to facilitate the actual progress of the migration. Once again, each of these things takes literally a second, or it takes longer to type it than it does to actually execute it. It's one of those things. Then we have to download one additional repo, which is the convert to RHEL repo, which just is the pointer to the software that convert to RHEL is going to use. And so this is the command that's going to end up doing that. Once again, all this stuff is happening really, really quickly. And then we have to actually install convert to RHEL. And this is, once again, another very quick thing, because there's not a whole lot there, but it will go banging through. And then you get started. Now, convert to RHEL does have multiple options for authorizing things here. In this case, this one talks about finding your organization ID and using an activation key. On the demo we're about to see, it uses the redhat.com username and password. There are many different ways that you can do this, whichever makes the most sense for you. But you then basically start the process, and it will ask a couple different times to, do you want to continue? Do you want to continue? Once again, giving you final chance to kind of back out. But then when it executes, then you reboot. and then you're done. That's it. That's it. Okay, so I'm going to try this actual demo, and like I said, this takes like about 2.25 minutes, and I'll try to explain things as we go, but it's going to follow the pattern that we just saw in the annotated demo, so there's no real surprises. And I'm just going to start this thing rolling. So here we start off with checking the release, which is what we said that was the first step. So we know that we are indeed running with a CentOS box. Then we can begin by, which one is this? So this is actually then going ahead and securing the packages that are needed, making sure then everything is up to date, because we got to be using latest and greatest. And now this is the convert to RHEL step. In this case, if you can actually read the eye chart, it's using applying a username, and a little later it will ask for the password. And so so this begins the actual conversion process, and bang, there it begins. And things start rolling along, and it stops to say, do you really want to continue with this at this point? And it goes ahead and starts rolling through that as well. Now it's asking for the password to validate against redhat.com. That's what we used inside this demo. And so it is now registering the system. It's setting up all the new Red Hat repositories that are needed. And then once again, it's saying, okay, you know, this is fish or cut bait. Here we go. So so it's asking for the final couple times to actually continue on. I believe this is the last one that we just saw here. And so it will begin the conversion of going through the CentOS packages and reinstalling with RHEL packages. And it's doing it all while you know, you can run out for coffee, honestly. And it just completed. Now this was a CentOS box that was, you know, built in a VM, and he just issued the reboot command, and all is done. That's it. It is horribly straightforward, shall we say. That's part of the joy of this. Oh, it's starting again. My apologies. There we go. So that is really what the process is about. It is a very simple process. And once again, if you are in the situation where you have a lot of these boxes, dozens, hundreds, thousands, that migration process becomes critical for obvious reasons. You don't want to be wasting a lot of time on each box doing the migration. We have tried to keep it simple. We've tried to keep it easy. And in fact, one of the command line things for people who might be concerned about it, you can add a -y that basically says, don't even ask me to continue, just go with it. So that makes it even simpler. But the process really is that simple, to take a CentOS box to make it a RHEL box. Now, obviously, this was a fresh little VM. If you have a you know, a bit beefier machine with a lot more packages, obviously it's going to take a bit more time. But still, we're talking about things that move pretty quickly, and as you can tell just from the looks of it, it's easily automatable as well. And in the beginning, you know, we've touched a little bit about Ansible, but I will say this: Ansible has become a key way that Red Hat is dealing with system management overall, because it is one of those things that is so ridiculously powerful, quite honestly, and so useful for these sorts of things, that to do a migration, you know, setting it up via playbook or whatever, is actually pretty darn trivial, and then being able to replicate that over and over again, not a problem at all with Ansible. Ansible is immensely powerful. More and more you will see within the RHEL releases, particularly the growing number of playbooks which are there for the system administrator to take some of the workload off. That's a big deal. As you know, if you're in operations, you know very well that a lot of time gets spent doing repetitive tasks, and that's not profitable. I mean, we all have more to do, particularly these days. Every organization I touch base with, they've got a list of things that they need to get done, and it never gets smaller. It always gets bigger. So all the more we want to take the mundane stuff, automate it, make it simpler, and get it done. Just get it done. And one of the beauties of if you actually go with the full Ansible Automation Platform, all the things that get done, they automatically get logged. The results get logged. Who ordered it gets logged. You know, all this sort of stuff. So once again, particularly in the public sector world, where everything's about, you know, the audit, everything's about who did what, when, where. All of that is just built into the way Ansible Automation Platform works. So you've got that accountability, you've got that knowledge. So if something went wrong somewhere and someone didn't pick it up, you can actually go back into the log, say, oh, wait a second, this thing failed, and for some reason no one bothered to challenge this or to redo it. Let's fix it. Really immensely powerful. So that is the close of what I have. If you have issues, if you could find your way to the Q&A box, if you've got questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them. You know, this is about you. I want to hopefully give you something that you can work with, something that you can take back to your organizations and have something worth discussing as far as going forward. So if there's any sort of Q&A. You know, one of the things about this that I will say is there's been a lot of time that's gone into this to try to make this as seamless and easy as possible. And it really does show when you actually play around with the convert to RHEL system. You know, you literally do spend more time actually, you know, adding the repo and the keys and stuff like this up front than you do exerting the effort on the conversion itself. And I think that's a good thing. Well, we don't seem to be catching much in the way of questions. Maybe I should ask our Fierce team if they want to close out the session.
Yeah, I don't see any questions either, Russ, but thank you so much as always. It was great. And if you have any questions, like I mentioned, you'll be receiving an email from myself with the recorded copy of this. So you will able to either respond back to that if you have any questions, or you can email sales@fiercesw.com. Thank you so much for coming, and we look forward to you guys coming to a webinar in the future.